What happens when the most vulnerable person knocks on the door of the most powerful? Before you tonight is a story that peels back the curtain of wealth, revealing the secrets that lie within a billionaire's fortress. A heavily pregnant woman, abandoned and with nowhere to turn, collapses at the gates of a magnificent mansion. The woman who answers the door, the billionaire's beautiful and cruel mistress, shows her no mercy. But they are both unaware that the master of the house is returning, and his arrival will trigger a chain of events so shocking it will unravel a decades-old mystery and change all of their lives forever. Stay with us as we uncover the truth behind the headlines. The rain began as a whisper, a soft, apologetic mist against the chilling autumn air. For Clara Evans, it felt like a final insult from a world that had offered nothing but closed doors and cold shoulders. Each drop that soaked into her thin coat added another layer to the bone-deep cold that had settled in her limbs hours ago. Her hand rested instinctively, protectively on the swell of her belly. 8 months. 8 months of hope that had slowly curdled into a gnawing, ever-present fear. The baby kicked a small, insistent flutter against her ribs, a reminder of the life that depended entirely on her, even as her own strength was failing. Before her stood the Hawthorne estate. It wasn't just a house, it was a declaration of war against mediocrity. A 10-foot-high wrought-iron fence, each spire a miniature spear, aimed at the sky, enclosed acres of impossibly green lawn. The mansion itself loomed in the distance, a colossal structure of pale stone and dark slate, its windows glowing with a warm golden light that felt like a personal mockery of the encroaching twilight and Clara's own darkening world. She had been walking for 3 days, surviving on the dregs of her savings and the kindness of a few strangers, all to reach this place. This was the address scrawled on a crumpled piece of paper, the last desperate gamble of a woman who had run out of options. It was the home of Alexander Hawthorne, the father of her child. Or so she had been led to believe by the man who had promised her everything and left her with nothing. Her knuckles were white as she gripped the cold, unforgiving bars of the gate. A sleek, black intercom panel with a single, unblinking camera eye was set into the stone pillar beside it. Taking a ragged breath that hitched in her throat, she pressed the button. A moment of static, then a crisp, disembodied voice cut through the air. "Yes, this is a private residence. Please." Clara's voice was a hoarse crackle, far weaker than she intended. "Please, I need to speak with Mr. Hawthorne. My name is Clara Evans. It's urgent." And the silence that followed was heavy judgmental. Clara could feel the unseen eyes from the camera, cataloguing her worn-out shoes, her rain-dampened hair, the desperate plea etched onto her face. "Mr. Hawthorne is not available. Please leave the premises." Tears of frustration and sheer exhaustion welled in Clara's eyes. "No, you don't understand. I have to see him. I'm carrying his child." The words tumbled out, a raw confession, into the impersonal speaker. It was her last card to play the one truth she clung to. Another pause, longer this time. Then the click of the lock. Not the main gates, but a smaller pedestrian door to the side. It swung open a few inches, revealing not a uniformed guard, as she expected, but a woman. She was breathtakingly beautiful, with raven black hair styled in a severe, elegant bob and eyes the color of cold jade. She wore a silk dressing gown the color of blood, and her perfectly manicured fingers, adorned with a large diamond ring, held the gate ajar. This was Victoria Vance, a name whispered in gossip columns, the constant companion of the notoriously reclusive billionaire. Victoria's eyes swept over Clara, from her frayed collar to the unmistakable swell of her stomach, and a look of utter contempt twisted her beautiful features. "His child?" She purred, the sound like shattered glass. "Darling, you're not even the first one this month. Do you have any idea how many pathetic creatures like you try this little stunt?" "It's not a stunt," Clara insisted, her voice trembling, but gaining a sliver of strength from the insult. "His name is Robert. He worked for Mr. Hawthorne. He told me, he told me Alexander Hawthorne was his father and that he would help us if anything went wrong." Victoria let out a short, sharp laugh that held no humour. "Robert, oh, you mean the stable boy? He was fired 2 months ago for theft. And believe me, he was no more Alexander's son than you are the Queen of England. He was a liar and a thief, and you, my dear, are just his latest, most gullible victim." The world seemed to tilt under Clara's feet. Fired. A thief. The man who had sworn he loved her, who had whispered promises of a future in her ear. It couldn't be true. "No," she whispered, shaking her head in denial. "No, he wouldn't. He promised." "Promises are for fools," Victoria sneered, her patience wearing thin. "Now get away from this gate, Shofat. You're an eyesore. I'm expecting guests, and I won't have the entrance cluttered with this." She gestured vaguely at Clara as if she were a piece of trash that had blown in with the wind. Desperation clawed its way up Clara's throat, hot and sharp. "Please," she begged, tears now streaming freely down her cold cheeks, mingling with the rain. "I have nowhere else to go. My baby. Just for one night. A dry place to sleep." "I won't cause any trouble." She took a stumbling step forward, her hand outstretched, reaching through the gap in the gate. It was a primal, instinctual plea for help, for a shred of human decency. Victoria recoiled, as if Clara's hand were diseased. "Don't you dare touch me," she hissed, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. Her face a mask of cold fury, contorted. In a swift, brutal movement, she shoved the heavy iron gate. The impact was jarring. The gate slammed shut, catching Clara's outstretched hand. She cried out a sharp yelp of pain as metal crushed her fingers, but the momentum was too much. Her body, already weak from hunger and exhaustion, was thrown off balance. Her feet tangled beneath her. She fell backwards hard, her head striking the wet pavement with a sickening thud. The grey sky swirled above her, the golden lights of the mansion blurring into streaks. The last thing she heard before darkness consumed her was the sharp click of the gate lock and the fading sound of Victoria Vance's dismissive footsteps walking away. The rain began to fall harder, washing over her still form in the deepening gloom. The Bentley moved with a silent, predatory grace, its powerful engine a mere whisper against the drumming of the rain on its roof. Inside, Alexander Hawthorne stared out at the blurred landscape of his own estate, but he didn't truly see it. His grey eyes, which could command boardrooms and make markets tremble, were shadowed with a weariness that had nothing to do with business. It had been 5 years since his wife Sophia had passed, but the silence she left behind still echoed in every cavernous room of the mansion, in every tick of every antique clock. He was a man who possessed everything and felt he had nothing. Victoria's call had been an irritation, another manufactured drama about some socialite slight at a charity gala. He was returning home early from a business dinner in the city, not for her, but for the quiet solitude of his library, where he could surround himself with the ghosts of better times. As the car made the final sweeping turn toward the main gates, the powerful headlights cut through the deluge, illuminating a scene that made Alexander sit bolt upright. A figure, a woman, was lying motionless on the pavement just outside his property. A dark, crumpled shape against the unforgiving stone. "Stop the car, Charles," he commanded, his voice sharp with an authority that was rarely questioned. The driver, a man who had been with him for 20 years, brought the Bentley to a smooth halt. Before Charles could even get out to open the door, Alexander was pushing it open himself, stepping out into the cold, driving rain. He shrugged off his expensive suit jacket, holding it over his head as a makeshift shield as he strode quickly towards the fallen woman. He knelt his knee, landing in a puddle with a soft splash that went unnoticed. The woman was young, her face pale and streaked with rain and tears. Her hair was plastered to her forehead, and a trickle of blood ran from a cut on her temple where her head had hit the ground. Then his eyes fell on the pronounced curve of her belly, and a cold knot formed in his stomach. She was pregnant, heavily so. "Charles, call an ambulance. Now." Alexander ordered, his voice tight. He gently brushed the wet hair from her face, feeling for a pulse at her neck. It was there, thready, but present. A small, almost inaudible moan escaped her lips. As Charles spoke urgently into his phone, the side gate to the estate clicked open. Victoria emerged holding a large black umbrella, an expression of extreme annoyance on her face. "Alexander, you're home early?" She began, her tone a mixture of surprise and irritation. Then she saw the scene before her. "Oh, for heaven's sake! Is she still here? I told her to leave." Alexander's head snapped up, his gaze locking onto hers with an icy intensity that made her flinch. "You knew she was here? You saw her?" "Of course I saw her," Victoria said, trying to sound reasonable, as if dealing with a common pest. "She came to the gate spouting some nonsense about being pregnant with your child. A ridiculous story, obviously. I sent her away." "You sent her away?" Alexander's voice was dangerously low. He looked down at the woman's bruised and scraped hand, the fingers already beginning to swell. "And what happened to her hand? How did she fall?" Victoria waved a dismissive hand. "She was hysterical. She probably tripped. These people are always so dramatic, looking for a handout. She was making a scene." Just then, the head butler, a stoic man named Alistair Finch, appeared behind Victoria, his face a mask of professional concern. He had heard the commotion from the gatehouse. "Mr. Hawthorne," Alistair said, his voice calm and steady. "I saw the incident on the security monitor, sir. The young woman was pleading. Miss Vance closed the gate on her hand. The force of it knocked her over." The silence that followed was thick and suffocating, broken only by the sound of the rain. Victoria's face went white, her eyes darting from Alistair's impassive expression to Alexander's thunderous one. "He's lying. He's always disliked me." She was trying to force her way in. Alexander didn't even look at her. His focus was entirely on the unconscious woman at his feet. He had built an empire on his ability to read people, to dissect truth from lies in an instant. He saw the truth in Alistair's steady gaze and in the brutal, ugly evidence before him, a desperate pregnant woman, injured and unconscious, at his gate, because the woman he shared his home with couldn't be bothered with a shred of compassion. "The ambulance is 5 minutes out, sir," Charles reported, ending the call. "It's not fast enough." Alexander said, a decision solidifying in his mind. He carefully, gently scooped the woman into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, fragile. "Alistair, have Dr. Reed meet me at the house immediately. Prepare the rose suite. Charles, get the gate open." He carried her as if she were made of glass, his expensive suit now soaked and stained, his mind racing. The sheer callousness of Victoria's actions disgusted him. For years he had tolerated her vanity, her social climbing, her materialism, because it was easy. She filled the silence without demanding anything of his heart, which he had locked away when Sophia died. But this was different. This was a cruelty so profound, it had breached the walls of his apathy. As he walked through the now open gates, Victoria hurried after him, her voice a frantic, pleading whisper. "Alexander, what are you doing? You can't bring her inside. She could be anyone. A grifter, a thief. Think of the liability." Alexander didn't stop or slow his pace. He simply looked at her over his shoulder, his eyes as cold and hard as granite. "The only liability I see right now, Victoria, is you." He carried Clara into the warmth and light of the mansion, leaving Victoria standing alone in the rain, the umbrella trembling in her hand as the world she had so carefully constructed began to crumble around her. The great oak doors of the Hawthorne estate swung shut behind him with a resounding thud, sealing one person's fate while opening the door to another's. Clara drifted back to consciousness slowly, as if surfacing from a deep, dark body of water. The first thing she registered was a profound softness beneath her, a mattress so plush it felt like sleeping on a cloud. The air, once damp and bitingly cold, was now warm and smelled faintly of lavender and lemon polish. A gentle weight rested over her, a thick, downy comforter. This wasn't the damp pavement. This wasn't a homeless shelter. For a terrifying moment, she thought she might be dead. She forced her heavy eyelids open. The ceiling above her was a canvas of intricate white plasterwork, from which hung a small, delicate crystal chandelier that cast a soft, muted glow. She turned her head, a dull ache throbbing at her temple. She was in a bedroom, a room larger and more opulent than any she had ever seen outside of a magazine. The walls were covered in pale rose silk. The furniture was dark, polished cherry wood, and a fire crackled merrily in a marble fireplace across the room. Her wet, ragged clothes were gone, replaced by a soft, warm nightgown of brushed cotton. Her injured hand was cleaned, bandaged, and resting on a pillow. Panic, sharp and immediate, seized her. Where was she? Who had brought her here? She tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness washed over her, and a gentle but firm hand pressed on her shoulder. "Easy now, my dear. You took quite a fall," a kind matronly voice said. Clara looked to her side and saw a woman in a crisp white coat. She had warm eyes and greying hair pulled back in a neat bun. She held a stethoscope in her hand. "My name is Dr. Evelyn Reed. You're in the Hawthorne residence. Mr. Hawthorne brought you inside." "Mr. Hawthorne," Clara whispered, her throat dry. The name echoed in the vast, quiet room. The billionaire himself. The man whose name was a legend in the financial world. "Yes," the doctor confirmed, her voice soothing. "He was very concerned. Now I've checked you over. You have a mild concussion, which explains the headache and dizziness. Your hand is badly bruised, but nothing is broken. My main concern, however, is for you and the baby." Dr. Reed's professional demeanor softened with a look of genuine sympathy. "You're severely dehydrated and malnourished, Clara. Your blood pressure is dangerously low. You've been running on empty for a long time, haven't you?" Clara could only nod, the shame and exhaustion of her situation washing over her anew. Tears pricked at her eyes. "It's all right," the doctor said, patting her uninjured hand. "You're safe now. We're going to get some fluids and nutrients into you. We need to keep a close eye on the baby. The stress you've been under is not ideal, but your little one is a fighter. The heartbeat is strong." A wave of profound relief, so powerful it felt like a physical blow, washed through Clara. The baby was okay. That was all that mattered. A short while later, a housekeeper brought in a tray with a bowl of warm, steaming broth and a glass of water. Clara drank and ate slowly, each spoonful feeling like a miracle, a gift of life and warmth spreading through her exhausted body. As she finished, the door opened quietly, and Alexander Hawthorne stepped inside. He had changed out of his wetsuit into a simple cashmere sweater and trousers. In the soft light of the room, he looked less like a corporate titan and more like a man carrying a private weight. His eyes, though, were sharp and observant, taking in every detail of her condition. "Miss Evans," he said, his voice a low, resonant baritone. "I am Alexander Hawthorne. I am deeply sorry for what happened to you at my gate." Clara stared at him, intimidated and overwhelmed. You brought me in." "I did," he said, pulling a chair from the corner and sitting a respectful distance from the bed. "The alternative was unthinkable. Dr. Reed has told me about your condition. You need rest." "Thank you," Clara whispered the words, feeling utterly inadequate. "You didn't have to." "My butler, Mr. Finch, explained the situation. He overheard your conversation with Miss Vance." Alexander said, his expression hardening for a moment at the mention of Victoria's name. "You were looking for a man named Robert, who you believed to be my son." Clara nodded, her gaze falling to the rich tapestry of the rug on the floor. "He told me he was. He said you had a falling out, that you were estranged. He said he worked in the stables to stay close to prove himself to you. He, he made it all sound so believable. Alexander sighed a deep, weary sound. I'm afraid Victoria was telling the truth about one thing. Robert was a stable hand and nothing more. I have no son. My wife and I, we were never able to have children. A flicker of old, deep pain crossed his features so quick that Clara almost missed it. He was dismissed for stealing silverware and a few pieces of jewellery from the staff quarters. I'm sorry, Miss Evans. It seems he was a very proficient liar. The finality in his tone extinguished the last ember of hope Clara had held that it was all a mistake. It was true. The man she had loved, the father of her child, was a common thief and a cruel manipulator who had used her and abandoned her. The tears she had been holding back finally came, silent and bitter. Alexander waited patiently for her quiet sobs to subside. He didn't offer empty platitudes or awkward reassurances. He simply gave her the dignity of her grief. When she finally looked up, her eyes red-rimmed, she asked the question that terrified her most. What happens now? I'll leave in the morning. I won't be any more trouble. Leave. Alexander looked at her as if the idea were preposterous. In your condition, absolutely not. You will stay here as my guest for as long as you need to. You will have the best medical care, proper nutrition, and a safe place to rest until your child is born. Clara was stunned into silence. But Jai, why, you don't know me. I'm a stranger. Alexander's gaze drifted towards the window, looking out at the rain-swept grounds. Let's just say that I have found myself in a position where I can offer help, and you are in a position where you clearly need it. For too long I have allowed this house to be a monument to the past. Perhaps it's time it became a sanctuary for the future. He looked back at her, his eyes holding a surprising depth of kindness. Your only job now, Clara, is to rest and take care of yourself and your baby. We can figure out the rest later. As he stood and left the room, closing the door softly behind him, Clara lay back against the pillows, her mind reeling. She had come to this place expecting at best a small handout and at worst another slammed door. Instead, she had been met with a level of kindness and generosity she could barely comprehend. In the heart of the imposing fortress, under the roof of a man whose name was synonymous with power and wealth, she had found an impossible, unbelievable glimmer of sanctuary. Victoria Vance felt the marble floor beneath her designer heels as if it were a sheet of ice. The atmosphere in the Hawthorne mansion had shifted overnight, becoming as cold and hostile to her as the rain she'd been left in. Alexander had barely spoken a word to her since the incident. He hadn't officially told her to leave, but his message was clear in his icy glares and clipped monosyllabic responses. He had moved his personal effects into one of the other master suites, leaving her alone in the opulent bedroom they had once shared. The space now felt less like a lover's boudoir and more like a gilded cage. Her position, which she had always viewed as unassailable, felt terrifyingly precarious. For 3 years, she had been Mrs. Hawthorne in all but name. She organized the parties, graced the charity events on his arm, and managed his social life. She saw herself as the rightful heir to Sophia's throne, a vibrant, modern queen, to replace the beloved but tragically deceased one. Alexander had been content to let her play the part. He was emotionally distant, forever mourning his late wife, but he provided a lifestyle beyond her wildest dreams. In return, she provided a beautiful, polished buffer between him and the outside world. It was a transaction, and she had always understood its terms. Now, this pregnant waif, Clara, had upset the entire balance. She was a direct threat, a walking, breathing symbol of everything Victoria was not: vulnerable, helpless, and most dangerously, an object of Alexander's genuine concern. She had seen the look in his eyes when he carried Clara inside. It wasn't lust. It was something far more potent and threatening: compassion. It was a look he had never once directed at her. Victoria's mind, sharp and calculating, went to work. She couldn't defeat this girl with overt aggression. Her disastrous actions at the gate had already proven that. Alexander had taken Clara's side, so she would have to be smarter. She needed to discredit Clara to paint her not as a victim, but as a predator, a cunning, manipulative gold digger who had concocted an elaborate scheme to infiltrate the Hawthorne fortune. Her campaign began subtly. She started with the staff. During a quiet moment in the kitchen, she cornered the head housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, a woman who had been with the family for 30 years and was fiercely loyal to the memory of the first Mrs. Hawthorne. "It's just so tragic, isn't it?" Victoria began, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. "That poor girl. One has to wonder, though. It's all a bit convenient, don't you think?" Mrs. Gable's expression remained neutral. "Mr. Hawthorne has instructed us to ensure Miss Evans has everything she needs." Of course, Alexander is a saint," Victoria said, waving her hand airily. "But he can be too trusting. His heart is so big. A young, pregnant girl showing up right at his gate. It's the oldest trick in the book. I just worry she's taking advantage of his grief." She let the word grief hang in the air, a deliberate reminder of Sophia. Later, she found one of the younger maids, a girl named Bethany, polishing silver in the dining room. "Bethany, have you seen the girl, Clara?" Victoria asked conspiratorially. "I saw her earlier. Did you notice her eyes? They're always watching, calculating. She asked me about the value of the painting in her room. Can you believe it? She's barely conscious, and she's already appraising the furniture." It was a complete fabrication, of course. Clara had barely spoken 2 words to anyone but the doctor. But Bethany, young and impressionable, looked horrified. The seed of doubt was planted. Victoria's next target was Alexander himself. She knew a direct assault on Clara's character would backfire. Instead, she chose a more insidious approach, feigning concern for his well-being and security. She found him in his study that evening, staring into the fire, a glass of scotch in his hand. She approached cautiously, her demeanor soft and contrite. "Alexander," she began, her voice a well-practiced whisper of concern. "I know you're angry with me, and you have every right to be. My behavior was unforgivable. I was stressed, and I acted horribly. But my fear, it came from a place of wanting to protect you." He didn't turn to look at her. "Protect me from a pregnant woman in the rain." "Protect you from a potential threat," she insisted, stepping closer. "We know nothing about her. She claims she was involved with a fired stable hand, a known thief. What if they were in it together? What if this is a setup? She collapses at our gate, gets brought into the house. It's the perfect way for an accomplice to get inside information. To case the joint, as they say." He was silent, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. She pressed on. "I just think we should be careful, for your own safety. I've taken the liberty of hiring a private investigator. A discreet one, of course. Just to run a background check on this Clara Evans. To make sure she is who she says she is. To make sure you're not bringing a viper into your home." Finally, he turned to look at her. His face was unreadable, his eyes shadowed. "You hired a private investigator? For you," she said, placing a hand on his arm. "For us, to protect this family." He slowly pulled his arm away from her touch. "That won't be necessary, Victoria." "But Alexander," I said. He repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "It won't be necessary. I will handle the security of my own home." He turned back to the fire, a clear dismissal. Victoria retreated, a cold smile touching her lips as she walked out of the study. He had said he would handle it, which meant the seed of doubt had taken root. He was thinking about it. He was worried. Her investigator, a man named Slater, who was known for his ability to find or create dirt on anyone, was already at work. It was only a matter of time. She would prove to Alexander that this girl was a fraud, a snake in their garden. And when she did, he would not only cast Clara out, but he would turn back to Victoria, grateful that she had been the only one vigilant enough to protect him from his own kindness. The whispers had started. Soon, they would become a roar. The Hawthorne mansion, which had at first felt like an intimidating museum, slowly began to feel like a haven to Clara. Under the watchful eye of Dr. Reed and the surprisingly gentle care of the household staff, she began to recover. Colour returned to her cheeks, and the hollows under her eyes began to fade. The baby, nourished and safe, grew stronger, its movements more confident. Mrs. Gable, the head housekeeper, whom Victoria had tried to poison against her, turned out to be a source of quiet, steady support, often bringing Clara extra blankets or a warm cup of herbal tea, her stern facade melting away in the face of Clara's gentle gratitude. Alexander was a constant, if reserved, presence. He would join her for short periods in the sunroom, a beautiful glass-walled space filled with lush plants that had been Sophia's favourite part of the house. He never pried into her past, but instead asked about her hopes for the baby. He spoke of his own life, not of business or finance, but of his late wife. He told Clara about Sophia's passion for gardening, her love for classical music, the way her laughter could fill the cavernous halls of the mansion and make it feel like a home. In Clara, Alexander saw a glimmer of the same quiet strength and innate kindness that he had so loved in Sophia. Clara wasn't a replacement, not even a reminder, but her presence seemed to stir the dormant, warmer parts of the house and his own heart. He found himself looking forward to their brief, peaceful conversations. He also found himself watching Victoria with new, critical eyes. He saw the way she spoke down to the staff, the thinly veiled venom in her concerned questions about Clara, the constant cloying attempts to regain her footing in his life. The more time he spent in Clara's calming presence, the more Victoria's manipulative nature grated on his nerves. The contrast was stark and unsettling. Meanwhile, Victoria was growing more desperate. Her private investigator, Slater, was proving to be expensive and so far frustratingly ineffective. Clara Evans's past was tragically simple. She was an orphan, raised in the foster care system, with a spotless record. She had worked a series of low-paying jobs, never staying in one place for long. There were no hidden criminal ties, no secret accomplices. She was exactly what she appeared to be, alone and destitute. "This is useless," Victoria hissed into the phone at Slater, one afternoon, pacing in her suite. "I'm not paying you to tell me she's a saint. I need something I can use. Dig deeper." Everyone has a secret. Slater. A man with a flexible moral compass understood what was being asked of him. He wasn't just being paid to find the truth. He was being paid to find a version of the truth that his client wanted. "Sometimes," he said in a gravelly voice, "you don't find dirt, you just have to know where to create it." 2 days later, Slater called back, a triumphant tone in his voice. "I've got it," he said. "The girl Evans, she spent 6 months working as a waitress in a diner in a town called Northwood. The owner's son, a kid named Ricky Dunn, has a record. A few minor cons, small-time fraud. It's a stretch, but I can make it look like they were working together. I found a photo of them at a staff party on the diner's old social media page. With a little creative storytelling, we can paint a picture of her as the honey trap in his schemes. Plausible enough to plant the seed." Victoria felt a surge of vicious excitement. It was perfect. It wasn't concrete proof, but it was ugly enough. It created a narrative. She immediately began to plan her moment. She would not let this opportunity go to waste. She would stage the perfect confrontation, one that would expose Clara as a fraud and re-establish her own importance in Alexander's eyes. She decided a small intimate dinner would be the perfect setting. It would be just the three of them. She arranged it with the staff, feigning a desire to clear the air and formally welcome Clara. That evening, the atmosphere in the grand dining room was thick with tension. A magnificent crystal chandelier glittered over the long, polished mahogany table. The table was set for 3, but the distance between the settings felt like miles. Clara, wearing a simple but elegant maternity dress that Mrs. Gable had found for her, felt deeply uncomfortable. She could feel Victoria's eyes on her, sharp and predatory. Alexander, sensing the unease, tried to steer the conversation toward neutral topics. He asked Clara about baby names and spoke of a new wing he was funding at the local hospital. Victoria waited, biding her time, a shark circling in the water. She let the main course be served, let a fragile sense of normalcy settle over the table. Then, as the plates were being cleared, she made her move. "Alexander," she began, her voice smooth as silk but with an edge of steel. "We need to talk about our guest." Alexander put down his wineglass, his expression wary. "Victoria, this is not the time or the place." "I think it's the perfect time and place," she countered, her voice rising slightly. She turned her cold gaze on Clara. "You have played your part beautifully, I'll give you that. The damsel in distress. So helpless, so innocent. But the show is over." Clara stared at her, her heart beginning to pound. I don't know what you mean." "Oh, I think you do," Victoria sneered. She reached into her handbag and pulled out a slim file folder, slapping it down on the table with dramatic flair. "I did a little digging into your past, Clara, or whatever your real name is. You see, Alexander may be blinded by misplaced pity, but I am not. I know a grifter when I see one." She opened the folder, revealing a grainy photograph of Clara standing next to a young man with shifty eyes. "Recognize him, Ricky Dunn, a known con artist. You were his partner, weren't you? Seducing lonely men, and then he would come in and blackmail them. And now you've moved up to the big leagues. This whole story about the stable boy was a lie, a way to get your foot in the door. The baby, who knows who the real father is? But you saw your chance to trap the biggest whale of all, didn't you?" The accusation hung in the air, poisonous and suffocating. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. She looked at the picture, remembering Ricky as a sad, boastful boy who was always trying to find an easy way out of work. They had never been partners. They had barely been friends. "That's not true," Clara whispered, her voice shaking. "None of that is true." "Save your tears," Victoria snapped, turning to Alexander, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "You see, Alexander, I told you I would protect you. She is a viper, a liar, and a fraud who has been playing you for a fool from the moment she arrived. You have to throw her out. Tonight." She leaned back in her chair, a smug, satisfied smile on her face, confident that her carefully constructed lie was about to unravel Clara's life for good. She looked at Alexander, expecting to see shock, anger, and betrayal. Instead, she saw nothing but a profound, unnerving calm. He hadn't even glanced at the folder. He was just looking at her, his expression one of deep, final disappointment. The silence in the dining room stretched thin and taut, on the verge of snapping. Clara sat frozen, the vile accusations echoing in her ears, her world once again threatening to shatter. Victoria's triumphant smile remained plastered on her face, awaiting the explosion she was sure would come from Alexander. Alexander finally moved. He didn't look at the file Victoria had presented with such theatricality. Instead, he slowly folded his napkin, placed it beside his plate, and rested his hands on the table. He looked directly at Victoria, and when he spoke, his voice was devoid of all emotion, a flat, chilling monotone that was far more terrifying than any shout. "Is that all, Victoria?" The question caught her off guard. "What, Alexander, did you hear?" "What I said. She's a professional con artist. She's here to rob you blind." "I heard you," he replied calmly, "and I've heard your whispers to the staff. I've been aware of your little investigation since the day you hired Mr. Slater. Did you really think you could hire a man to delve into the life of a guest in my house without me knowing?" Victoria's confident smirk faltered. I was doing it for your own good. Were you—" Alexander's voice was still quiet, but it now carried a lethal edge. "You hired a bottom feeder, known for fabricating evidence to fit his client's narrative. You gave him a conclusion and paid him to find a path to it. That's not an investigation, Victoria. That's a smear campaign. He gestured for his butler, Alistair, who had been standing stoically in the corner of the room throughout the entire exchange. Alistair, would you please bring me the file from my desk, the one prepared by Mr. Croft's firm? Alistair nodded and left the room, returning moments later with a thick, leather-bound portfolio which he placed in front of Alexander. You see, Victoria? Alexander continued, his fingers resting on the portfolio. While you were busy playing detective, I had my actual legal team, Jonathan Croft, and his people professionals you might have heard of, conduct a real background check. A thorough one. He opened the portfolio. They found the same things you did at first. A young woman with a difficult past. Foster homes, menial jobs. They found the Northwood Diner. They even spoke with the owner. He described Clara as the most honest and hard-working employee he'd ever had. He said he had to fire his own son, Ricky Dunn, for stealing from the register. He mentioned how his son had a malicious obsession with Clara, and when she rejected his advances, he spread vicious rumors about her all over town. Rumors, Victoria, that your paid source was more than happy to embellish for a fee. Every word was a nail in the coffin of Victoria's scheme. The colour drained from her face, leaving her with a pale, waxy complexion. But my team went deeper, Alexander said, his gaze shifting to Clara, and for the first time a hint of warmth returned to his eyes. They looked into her family history, what little there was. Her mother, Catherine Evans, died in childbirth. There was no father listed on the birth certificate. Catherine was young, estranged from her family. She had run away from her home in a small town in upstate New York years before. Clara listened, her heart aching for the mother she never knew. This was more than she had ever known about her own origins. Alexander paused, taking a deep breath before delivering the final devastating blow. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his wallet. From it, he carefully extracted a small, worn photograph, its edges soft with time. He slid it across the table toward Clara. It was a picture of two young women teenagers, smiling brightly, their arms slung around each other's shoulders. One of them, the one with laughing eyes and a familiar warmth, was instantly recognizable from the portraits in the mansion. It was a young Sophia Hawthorne. The other girl, slightly younger, with the same fair hair and the same shaped eyes as Clara herself, was a stranger. The girl on the right is your mother, Catherine, Alexander said softly. And the woman she is with is my late wife, Sophia. They were sisters. The world stopped. Clara stared at the photograph, her mind struggling to process the information. Sophia. Her aunt. It was impossible. It couldn't be. After your mother ran away from home, her parents, Sophia's parents, passed away. Alexander explained, his voice thick with emotion. Sophia spent years trying to find her. She hired investigators, searched for her, tirelessly, but Catherine had vanished without a trace. It was the greatest regret of her life that she never found her sister, never got to reconcile. His eyes then fell to Clara's neck. Throughout her stay, she had never taken off the one thing she owned, of any value the only link to her mother, a small silver locket on a delicate chain. May I? He asked gently. Numbly, Clara nodded. Alexander leaned forward, his fingers surprisingly gentle as he picked up the locket. He pressed a tiny, almost invisible clasp on the side. It sprang open. On one side was a faded microscopic picture of a young woman, her mother Catherine. On the other side, facing it, was an identical photo of Sophia. Sophia gave this to her sister on her 16th birthday. Alexander said, his voice cracking slightly. She had an identical one. It was their secret, a symbol that they would always be connected no matter what. When I saw you wearing it the first day you were here, I had to know. Clara looked from the locket to the photo and then to Alexander's face. The pieces of her life, a scattered and confusing puzzle, suddenly slammed into place with breathtaking clarity. She wasn't just a stranger he had taken pity on. She was family. The baby inside her wasn't just her child. It was the last living blood relative of the woman he had loved more than life itself. Victoria sat in stunned, horrified silence. Her plot had not just failed, it had backfired in the most spectacular and absolute way imaginable. She hadn't just tried to oust a random grifter, she had tried to exile the last legacy of the sainted Sophia Hawthorne. In her attempt to secure her position, she had committed the ultimate unforgivable sin. She had become the enemy of Alexander's most sacred memory. The game was over. She had lost. The aftermath of the revelation was swift and surgically precise. Alexander didn't raise his voice. He didn't create a scene. He simply turned his gaze, now utterly devoid of any warmth or tolerance, back to Victoria. "Alistair," he said, his voice cummy but infused with the chilling finality of a judge passing sentence. "Please have Miss Vance's belongings packed and sent to her apartment in the city. A car will be ready for her out front in 10 minutes. Victoria stared at him, her face a mask of disbelief and panic. "Alexander, no, please. I didn't know. How could I have possibly known? It was a mistake. I was just trying to protect you." "You weren't protecting me, Victoria," he said finally, rising from his chair. He looked down at her, not with anger, but with a weary sort of pity that was somehow worse. "You were protecting your lifestyle. You saw a vulnerable, pregnant woman in need, and your first and only instinct was to treat her like vermin. You shoved her, you lied about it, and when that didn't work, you conspired to destroy her reputation. It doesn't matter if she was Sophia's niece or a complete stranger. What you did revealed the absolute truth of your character." He gestured to the door. "The car will be waiting." There was no arguing with the tone in his voice. It was the voice that closed billion-dollar deals and dismantled corporations. It was absolute. With a strangled sob, a mixture of fury and humiliation, Victoria stumbled from her chair and fled the room, her reign over the Hawthorne mansion ending not with a bang, but with the quiet, decisive closing of a door. When she was gone, a profound silence settled over the dining room. Alexander walked around the table and knelt beside Clara's chair. She was still staring at the locket in her hand, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of sadness, but of overwhelming, earth-shattering emotion. "My mother," she whispered, looking up at him. "All my life I felt so alone. I thought I came from nothing, from nowhere. You come from a long line of very strong women." Alexander said, his voice gentle. He took her hand, the one that wasn't holding the locket. "Sophia spoke of your mother constantly. She said Catherine was a firecracker, rebellious, passionate, always chasing a dream. She ran off with a musician, a man their parents disapproved of. Sophia always believed she would come home someday." He led her from the dining room, away from the scene of the confrontation, and back to the quiet comfort of the sunroom. They sat together on a sofa, surrounded by the lush greenery Sophia had so lovingly tended. For the next hour, Alexander filled in the missing pages of Clara's history. He told her about her grandparents, about the small town where her mother and Sophia had grown up. He showed her old photo albums filled with images of the two sisters laughing, growing from girls into young women. For Clara, it was like finding a missing part of her own soul. The ghosts of her past were suddenly given names, faces, and stories. She wasn't an accident or an inconvenience. She was the daughter of Catherine Evans, the niece of Sophia Hawthorne. She had roots. She belonged somewhere. When Sophia passed, Alexander confessed, his voice heavy with the memory. "This house became a shell. It was full of beautiful things, but it had no life, no future. I thought my family line, Sophia's legacy, had ended with her. I was just waiting out the clock." He looked at Clara, his eyes shining with an emotion she had never seen in him before. It was hope. "You and your child, you are that future Clara. You are the last piece of Sophia that this world has left. This is not just my house anymore. It is your home. Your birthright, if you will have it." The offer was staggering beyond anything she could have imagined. I can't accept that. It's too much." "It's not too much," he insisted. "It's what Sophia would have wanted. It's what I want. I want to help you raise this child. I want to give him or her the family, the security, the love that you were denied. Let me do this. For you, for Sophia. Looking around the beautiful, peaceful room, feeling the steady presence of the man beside her, Clara knew her days of running were over. She had spent her entire life searching for a safe harbor, a place to belong. She had come to these gates seeking help from a lie, only to find a truth more profound than she could have ever dreamed. She was not alone anymore. A few weeks later, the Rose Suite was transformed into a beautiful nursery filled with soft yellows and creams. Mrs. Gable fussed over Clara like a mother hen, and even the stern Mr. Finch could be seen cracking a smile when he spoke to her. The whispers in the halls had been replaced by a quiet, joyful anticipation. One afternoon, as Clara stood by the window of the sunroom looking out over the manicured lawns, Alexander came to stand beside her. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Sophia would have loved you so much," he said quietly. Clara leaned her head against his arm, a gesture of comfortable familiarity that would have been unthinkable just a short time ago. The baby kicked a strong, reassuring thump. "I think," she said, a genuine, radiant smile spreading across her face for the first time in a very long time, "we're going to name her Sophia." Alexander's breath hitched, and he squeezed her shoulder, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. He looked out at the gardens his wife had planted at the bright future, standing beside him, and for the first time in 5 long years, the heavy weight of grief in his chest felt a little bit lighter, replaced by the promise of a new, unexpected, and beautiful beginning. And so a story that began with a desperate plea in the pouring rain ends not just with a new home, but with a new family, forged in the crucible of secrets and lies. It's a powerful reminder that the cruelest actions often stem from insecurity, while the greatest acts of kindness can come from the most unexpected places. Clara didn't just find shelter in the Hawthorne mansion. She found her history, her identity, and a future for her child she never thought possible. Alexander, a man trapped in the past, was given a reason to live for the future, a final precious gift from the wife he had lost. This story shows us that truth has a way of revealing itself, and that character is defined not by wealth or status, but by how we treat those who have nothing to offer us in return. If this story of incredible twists and emotional revelations moved you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who loves a story about justice and unexpected blessings. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell for more real-life dramas that will touch your heart and make you think. Thank you for listening.